All right, welcome to the inaugural episode of Sopranopreneur, Season 1, Episode 1. I am your host, Mike Ficara. I am excited to be here with you and share with you some of the entrepreneurial lessons that can be learned from the Sopranos series. So let's talk about this a little bit before we dive into today's episode. I'll do a little bit of a preamble. Probably won't do this on many of the episodes, but definitely on this one so you get to know me a little bit better and get to know what this podcast is going to be about. So coming up, we're releasing this here on January 10th, 2024, which marks the 25th anniversary of the first airing of The Sopranos, Season 1, Episode 1, which I have such a great connection with The Sopranos. I must have rewatched the episodes more times than I can count. Probably rewatched them at least 3 to 4 times a year. I just always have it on. If there's nothing I really want to watch on Netflix or TV, I'll start watching The Sopranos and sometimes just even let it run in the background. And before you know it, I've streamed the whole series over a couple of weeks. So it's not hard to do. Could probably recite multiple lines. Could probably win a trivia contest if there ever was one, if I could be on it. And every time I've watched it, there's two things that really connect to me. First off, I'm an Italian American, born and raised in South Florida. So I have family that's from New York. All my family is from New York. My parents are from New York. They're high school sweethearts. My wife's family's from Newark, New Jersey. So obviously a big connection there to the show. But I particularly, I guess, best way you could, probably describe me as Carmine Lubitazzi, which we'll get to. We're going to talk about him. But I've always had a strong connection to my Italian heritage and my Italian culture. To be completely transparent as well, when the show aired, I was a senior in high school, and I didn't start watching the show probably until the second or third season when I was in college. That's when I really started to kind of get into it. My parents were kind of into it from the start. They watched it, and obviously being a teenager and kind of focused on other things at that time, I really wasn't that into the show, nor were they encouraging me to watch the show, but I knew they were watching it. I'd come in the living room a couple times. My dad would be cracking up laughing. I'd be like, "What are you laughing at? The Sopranos." Why is The Sopranos funny? I thought it was like a mob drama show. They would laugh at it, thought nothing of it. But then after a couple of years, I kind of really started to get in the show and watch it and became a huge fan. I think anyone that sits down and actually watches even one episode of the show, that's it, you're hooked. You're in. And as soon as I did that, I was hooked. I was in. Probably, like I said, probably into the second season, went back, rewatched the first season, and really just fell in love with the show for two reasons. Number one, how can you not? It's probably one of the greatest cinematic TV shows ever created on TV. It changed the landscape of what TV is. There's an argument to be made that television today is all based on what The Sopranos was back then. Streaming, binging shows, anything on Netflix, Hulu, wherever it may be, HBO Max, all shows today are probably because we have The Sopranos, where if we didn't have The Sopranos, you wouldn't have the shows that you have today. You wouldn't have these programs that you have today. So that's the first sort of nod to it. Is it was just a great show. I was hooked. The other thing was being Italian American, you related to the show. Yes, it was a mob show. Is any of my family in the mob? Not that I know of. Not that we would talk about it if they were, but not that I know of. But it was kind of like an Italian family show. You could relate to Tony and Carmela, Silvio. You could relate to Christopher. You could relate to some of these characters as Italian Americans. You knew people like the Soprano characters in your family. You knew people who were relatable. The Sunday dinners, the food they ate, the things they did, the traditions. Even as the show grew, cookbooks came out, and my family all purchased them. We would make recipes out of there and be like, "Wow, this is just like the way we make sauce," or "This is just the way we make strufoli," or "This is the way we make something," whatever it may be. A lot of the recipes were similar to things we did with our family, so it was also very relatable. As an Italian American, it was our everyone loves Raymond, but maybe a little bit more realistic and intense, if you will. It was a little bit more on that next level, and it was relatable, I think, to many Italian Americans as a family show. And that's something people have talked about. We're not going to get into that on this one. I may hint at it a few times as we go throughout the episodes, but this is going to focus though, because as you do watch it, and there have been articles written on this. I am in no way the first person to do this. I looked to see there's other podcasts out there like Sopranopreneur. There is not. But there have been articles written and papers and college courses and dissertations. And some people have talked about mafia tactics in business and different things like that. So I also myself, former teacher, taught for the better part of a decade in the classroom, and then got into the entrepreneurial space. Worked in startups in the education space, the cigar industry, uh, customer service, a whole bunch of different things. Now I kind of do business development and consulting. So I work with a lot of different entrepreneurs, even some Italian brands. I'm wearing the Hardcore Italian shirt right now. It's one of my clients. Guido Cigars is my cigar company. Like I said, I do some stuff in the cigar industry. No way are these companies sponsoring the show. I'm just simply stating my connection with them so you understand my connection to the Italian culture. And with that, as I've started to watch Sopranos as I've gotten older and been doing a lot of these things, I've picked up on things. I'm like, wow, there's a business lesson there. There's an entrepreneurial lesson there. So that's what this podcast is going to be about, teaching some of those entrepreneurial lessons. What I'm going to do is, in honor of Sopranos, every Sunday I'm going to watch the episode, record the episode, and then I'll probably release it every Wednesday. So I'll be watching and recording on Sundays and releasing on Wednesday to allow for editing and my team to do what they need to do. But that's what we'll be doing. So I really hope that you subscribe to this podcast. If you like it, I hope you share it with somebody who's a Sopranos fan or who's an Italian American. That being said, let me get some disclaimers out of the way too. I am in no way glorifying violence or anything like that. I mean, nor am I a PC person, so I'm going to curse. I'm going to say some things that are wrong. I'm going to be a little bit graphic. And listen, I think one of the greatest Sopranos podcasts out there is probably Talking Sopranos with Michael Imperioli and Steve Sciarippa. And they both talked about how, some of the stuff on here is very, very vulgar, very dark, very deep places. No way trying to glorify that, but so is entrepreneurship. I mean, there's a lot of darkness, there's struggles, there's a lot of successes, there's violence. There's maybe not people murdering people, but there's undercutting. There's a lot of things that go on that I think are relatable that we could take some fun lessons from this. So if you're an entrepreneur and if you're a fan of The Sopranos, this is meant to be fun, and that's all I'm trying to do is have a little bit of fun with this. I'm going to share my notes from the show, which is another disclaimer. You're going to see typos. I'm going to say things wrong. I may misname characters. I may make mistakes. So you hardcore Soprano fans out there, I do appreciate the criticism. Go ahead and lean into me if I make those mistakes, but if I do, I'm apologizing in advance. I may say someone's name wrong or misquote something in an episode, or I may do something wrong. I'm going to make some mistakes along the way. So please be as forgiving as you can with me on that. I appreciate you understanding that, much like Christopher, much like Tony, I'm not perfect, right? I'm going to make mistakes. And this thing's going to grow and develop as it goes along. Episodes may be short in the beginning, long in the beginning. I don't know how this is going to go. We'll see what happens and we'll see as they go along. And with that being said, too, any feedback you want to give me, I'm totally open to it. I'm hoping to maybe I'm going to reach out to people and see if we can't get some of the Soprano characters on the show. I think that would be awesome. I'm going to reach out to people. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I'm no one that important that I deserve it, but I have a podcast that I've been doing too now for 4 or 5 years called the Start Down Podcast, over 220 episodes, solely based on entrepreneurs. That's really what we focus on. So if you like, you can check that out. Reason why I mentioned this too, I did have Joe Gandasoli, who played Vito. We know there's going to be a big character arc for him that we're going to talk about here later as we go through this. And we're going to hit on Vito and some of the things he did. But he was on my podcast and been talking about entrepreneurship, some of the things he did in the NFL. We know a couple of the guys have gotten together and started the Omerta brand, which has coffee and cigars. Jackie Aprile Jr., who we know his sort of storyline. So maybe I can get some of these guys on the show. We're going to see what happens. I'll do reach out. If you're listening to this and you know any of those guys and you think they should be on the show, I would totally appreciate a hookup or a connection. We know Jamie Lynn Siegler and Robert Eiler, who played Meadow and AJ, also have a couple great podcasts they've done. They currently have one out right now as we're recording this called Not Today, Pal. Would love to have them on. I don't know if that's going to happen. So let's see what unfolds. Let's see what develops. Let's see what goes on. And let's just have a little bit of fun. And that's what this is all going to be about. That's what this podcast is going to focus on, is simply just the fun of looking at The Sopranos, looking at the show, looking at what it did for pop culture and TV, how it relates to Italian American culture, but more importantly, how it relates to entrepreneurship. So I hope you enjoy this journey. Listen, if you listen to this first little 10-minute intro here and you're like, no, this sounds ridiculous, go ahead and move on, but appreciate you hanging out this long. And if you're here, listen to it on 1x. I like to listen to my podcast on 2x speed. So we're going to dive right into the first episode. If you're watching this on YouTube as well, I'm going to have my notes. So every once in a while, if you see me looking down, I'm just simply looking at my notes, not ignoring you as the guest, because you are very important to me. If I take a pause, could be to enjoy a little bit of my cigar, which is going out. So I may stop having that as we go through here. But we are definitely going to dive in and we are going to enjoy the show. A couple things too that I've learned as I've gone into this, and it's funny, did a little bit of research before, which I've never done. I just kind of always watched the show and then took it for what it is. On IMDb, obviously, I think we're at 86. I think they had 86 episodes total that they had here. But I looked at season 1, episode 1 on IMDb, and I looked at the plot, and it simply said on Sunday, January 10, 1999. Like I said, this episode came out. Season 1, episode 1. It was simply called Pilot, and the title of it is just so intriguing. A mobster passes out at a family barbecue and seeks therapy to understand why. A mobster passes out at a family barbecue and seeks therapy to understand why. I mean, that was it. That's what launched this whole thing. doesn't sound like your typical, maybe like an Analyze This. I think Analyze This had come out at that point. So maybe, some people thought, all right, maybe we're building a little bit off of that. And if you ever watched the first episode, it's really great. Another thing is, actually, let me get that out of the way now, too. So if you've made it this far, if you've never watched The Sopranos, I'm going to talk about things that happened on the episode. I may also reference things that happened in later seasons that we're going to see. So there will be spoilers that will come out. So if you've never watched The Sopranos, where you been? What the fuck is wrong with you? No, I'm just kidding. But if you never watched The Sopranos, you may want to watch the episodes before I talk about them. And I will give away spoilers, but I'm assuming if you're watching this, if you're joining me on this journey, you probably have seen The Sopranos before I'm open, because I will give away some spoilers as we go through. So we're gonna go through, like I said, I'm gonna include the notes that I took on the episode down below, which will have a key entrepreneurial concept that I took away from the episode. So make sure that you check that out. But let's go ahead and dive right in. And on this episode, I feel like I have to talk about the intro. I have to talk about how every Sopranos, episode started with Tony making that drive from New York to New Jersey. Woke up this morning by 8:03, got myself a gun, and just the idea of all the concepts that are there in that introductory sort of walkthrough, if you will, to the show. The introductory to what we see of Tony, the introductory, this is the first week we get at him and what he does, and that journey from everything starting in New York and then heading to New Jersey. Once again, this is probably one of those spoiler parts that's very intriguing to me, but one of the concepts that we see throughout the show, especially, is this tension and also friendship between the New York mafia and the New Jersey mafia, where the New York mafia, and a lot of us may know the New York mafia is kind of always being the strong one. I think Sopranos was the first introduction to like a New Jersey mafia, if you will, or at least from my perspective. And that being said, we see this journey where Tony actually starts in New York and he's driving into New Jersey. And the New York crew, Johnny Sack especially, very often refers to them as a glorified crew. That there was not a lot of respect for them, but then there also was a lot as we went on. So it's this interesting dynamic. But we see the show kind of start there, almost saying that New York has the power. Debatable, definitely something we should talk about, but that's where things start. So Tony kind of starts with the drive. We see him drive from the big city, all the big buildings, all the big corporations, all the big things that you see there. And once again, this is kind of my entrepreneurial take on it. That's the mecca, right? That's kind of where things go. But then you see as he starts to get more and more into New Jersey, and this is something that was very interesting to me, especially watching that intro for this podcast, looking at it from the Sopranopreneur podcast perspective, is that he starts driving by more small businesses as he starts to get more and more into Jersey. You start seeing him drive by the local pizza shop and Satriali's, which is the pork store. These go from really big corporations that you see in New York to really the heartbeat of America, family, small business in New Jersey, which goes to that debate between the New York and the New Jersey mobs, which we'll see as a theme throughout the show. That authenticity of the New Jersey guys, why although they may not be the biggest and the best, they're still connected. They're still the most authentic. They're still doing the original things that we see there, which is really, really interesting. The other thing is, and if you've ever seen the show, the title sequence ends with Tony pulling up in his driveway to his house. And his house is going to be something that he references a lot throughout the show as sort of, look at how successful I am because I have this house. And that's something that Tony hangs kind of his hat on. Not a big car guy. He does get an Escalade at some point in the show, but really his house in therapy, when talking about his Uncle Junior, just a lot of different situations. He talked about his house as being a status symbol. There's even certain episodes where other people talk about, well, maybe we move to North Caldwell and we get a house near Tony, which I've been to Tony's house, just to the outside of the driveway where they shot the show. Had some my wife's family in New Jersey take me there. I was able to see it. It's a gorgeous area, right? But for him, the house is the level of success, and that's proof that he's successful. And I think as entrepreneurs, one of the things we're always trying to do, or very often trying to do, is prove the success that we have, or prove the level of success that we have. And I think it's very interesting that the title sequence starts with New York, which is obviously New York City is a mecca of success. Wall Street, big business. This is where things happen. He drives into New Jersey through these small towns, and then he ends up at this house, which is his mecca of success. Tony's house is his sort of like, hey, look at me, look at how well I've done because I have this house. And obviously he's not stopping there. He's continuing to work hard, continuing to find ways to make money. But I think it really is interesting that his house ending in that title sequence is the measure of success. And we'll see that throughout. I think as entrepreneurs too, we very often question, what is success for us? For some people, it is the house. For some people, it's a car. For some people, it's traveling. It's different things. We're going to see Christopher. His success is kind of fame. He wants to be the movie star guy, be able to do things. Chris ends up being a car guy. We'll talk about that in a little bit when we get move through the title sequence here. But really interesting. I just want to break down title sequence. This is probably the only episode we'll do that on, but definitely wanted to do that. And where do we start? Where do we really meet Tony for the first time, though, is sitting in Dr. Melfi's office, who is his therapist in the show. And we do know that he is basically going to go see the psychiatrist because, like I mentioned in the description there on IMDb, he had a panic attack, he passed out, and now he's seeking therapy. So he's trying to figure out why he passed out and what that is. So that's why he is going to see Dr. Melfi. And we see him sitting in the psychiatrist's office looking at the statue of the naked lady sitting there in the room. You could tell he's uncomfortable. And once again, if you're Italian, kind of therapy, this isn't something many Italians are used to doing. This is not something that we would very often take part in. And we see Tony go in, and Dr. Melfi comes and opens the door, and we know that there's going to be a relationship there, a relationship of therapy, a relationship of friendship, a relationship of communication, and somewhat of an outsider. And like I said, we meet Tony in kind of, if we talk about Tony's entrepreneurial journey, we're meeting him at a point where he's kind of, I don't want to say he's reached a peak of success, but he's reached the plateau of success, right? He's at a point now where he's successful and he's getting ready for the next climb. And I think the series really follows him on that next climb. But as he's gotten to the stable point, he's starting to have these odd feelings like, wait a second, I've got the house, I've got the family, I've got the leadership position in the mob that I wanted. Why don't I feel satisfied? And why am I having these panic attacks? And one line that is said in therapy, and one of the introductory lines to them talking is, Tony says, it's good to be in something from the ground floor, but lately I feel like I came in at the end, as if the good days were behind. And I really want to dig into this concept for a lot of reasons. One of them is, in business, we very often know entrepreneurship is a lot like the NFL, right? It's a copycat league. We look at things that are done and we see how do we duplicate it. And the mob, very steep in tradition, right? Guys being made, how things happen, what they do. It's really built on traditions and processes and hierarchies, very much like a military. Once again, we'll see that happen a lot. In business, too, in entrepreneurship, there's two ways to approach it. There's going after a concept that is something that is common or that everybody knows. And then there's also the ability to do something that's never been done before, right? The Zuckerbergs of the world that created, Facebook and Bezos and all these guys have maybe done things that haven't been done yet. And then there's the entrepreneurs that do things that really improve or just follow paths or great paths. So Tony's kind of on this precipice of like, man, like which one am I in? Like which group do I live in? Am I in this? I've done well, and Tony's almost mastered the standard for entrepreneurship, the basics, if you will. Hey, I came into this already established business culture as kind of an entrepreneur, somebody that wants to start things. He builds something, he comes in, and now he's reached this plateau, and now he's looking for, hey, what's next, right? And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs, we feel that way. I don't care whether you're creating an e-commerce business. I don't care whether you're opening a restaurant, whatever it is in an entrepreneur that you're doing. There are some things that you could do where you're going to hit this sort of entrepreneurial plateau, which I think Tony is at. And when we hit these plateau moments, hey, how do we get above and how do we go through that? Sometimes it creates stress, anxiety, and the plateaus, don't get me wrong, are both high and low, right? Like I said, Tony's at a point where money's good, family's good, house is good, car is good, but he's still frustrated. And then there's also the low plateaus, which we're going to see some of that with Artie when we get to Artie Bucco in the restaurant, where it's financial plateaus where things aren't good and they're bad, and you've worked hard and you put all this effort in and you kind of got a little bit of success, but you're still in the struggle stage. So there's multiple plateaus, I think, that we experience in entrepreneurship. And, the question is, how do we get over that? And once again, we meet the ducks too. Tony talks about the ducks in therapy, and this is a big thing. It's also kind of his escape. And you could tell he goes into the pool and nothing else matters. He's seeing these ducks. He has a connection to these ducks. And the ducks kind of mean something to him. And we'll see the ducks kind of departing is really what sort of kicked off his panic attack and really what triggered it as things were going along. He created a ramp for them, but it was also his escape from business as well, which I think as entrepreneurs too, I just want to hit on that point, I think is very important for us. We need to have both the escape and the business that we're in love with. So Tony obviously loves what he does, but he also has this escape with the birds and other things like that. And he's distracted. Even Carmela says, are you going to be home for AJ's birthday? And he says, yeah, I'll leave work early. And she says, I'm not talking about work. Tony also has other things he indulges in. He has a mistress. He has his birds. He has all these things that are not a part of his family. They're also distracting him from things that are important. And there's this pull for him in multiple directions, which we know we all have in business as well. After that, too, we cut to a scene where he talks about Christopher. And this is the first time we meet Christopher Moltisanti, who I guess for lack of a better term, could be described as Tony's protege, his young buck, but also very entrepreneurial, wants to be successful, has his own ideas, has his own path. And you can tell too, much like where Tony has hit this plateau of success, I think Chris is another example of a plateau we hit an entrepreneur. Tony, though, with the house and the car and the family, or really not the car, the house and the family, Christopher has gotten a little bit of success, and you can tell Tony's like, man, the kid made a little bit of money, and what's the first thing he did? He went out and bought a brand new Lexus. Now he says $60,000 Lexus, which in 1999, 25 years ago, was a lot of money to spend on a new car. Today, maybe not as much, wouldn't seem unreasonable, but maybe Tony thought that was a smart financial move, maybe not something he would have done. Tony at this point is driving an old beat up Suburban, but he's got the nice house. So, like I said, everybody's reward when it comes to business and entrepreneurship is the same thing. Also, Christopher kind of being the younger kid, not much younger than Tony, probably about 10 years. I think it's about the age difference, maybe if that. I think maybe a little more actually. Now that in the movie The Many Saints of Newark, I think he was almost a teenager. So maybe let's say 10 to 15 years age difference. But obviously, too, Tony feeling like he's a little more experienced than Christopher. And Christopher, oh, my mom didn't know if I should come in. I felt sick, which is funny because I think we make fun of Gen X and millennials, and we get into that whole debate another time. But you can see, I think it's just the age-old thing of like the older generation always thinks the younger generation is a little bit, off from where they are. And you're going to see Junior Soprano, who's Tony's uncle, is going to think the same thing of him. So there's these concepts of, what are the symbols of success, but more importantly, what are the ways in which we connect with the people who are in an organization? Tony, as a leader, is not doing everything. He has soldiers. He has people that are working underneath him. This is one of the most important things I see in entrepreneurship too. Why Chris may not be the best solution. Chris is his guy though, and he's investing time. We're going to see how much time he invests in Christopher with all the problems, Christopher's drug use, him not making smart decisions. We see that in the first episode a little bit. We're going to see what happens with him in email. There's a lot of things that happen, but we're going to see too that Tony is not just doing everything on his own. He does have soldiers, and he has people that helps them with things. And I think the structure of Tony's business and his organization, some entrepreneurial lessons in that are going to come out now as well. We also see too him and Christopher being an insurance agent that owes him money. And one of the things that I think that important thing that comes out of that is Tony talks about his reputation. Oh, you're telling people I'm not anything anymore. I'm not big enough. How we present ourselves too is important. And I think Tony is trying to establish himself as this guy in power, right? I'm someone that's in power. And I want people to respect me for that, and they're not doing that. I think it's important in business. We all want to feel that way, though, right? I think especially as entrepreneurs, but do we make smart decisions? I think sometimes, to me, in my opinion, Tony would be making a poor decision here. He's beating the guy. He's using fear tactics. That's not always the way you manage your reputation. But once again, this is one of those contradictory moments I talked about that will come across in here. But it is a tactic that's used in the mob to gain respect. And to develop fear. Is it better to be fear or loved, right? Chaz Palminteri, Bronxdale, another great line. We see that, and we look at what that is. The other thing is too, I love that we go from this insurance agent and them trying to get money out of him and what he owes him because the insurance agent basically a degenerate gambler to now the garbage contract. And we know in the mafia, and we know Tony throughout the series, his basic job is waste management. That he works in recycling and environmental cleanup. Meadow struggles, his daughter struggles to say what he does. And we see that there's a garbage contract now that's up for negotiation. There's another group that wants to do it for less. And that is trying to take a bid and try to take this away from Tony and his Barone Sanitation, which is the established business, right? And sometimes we see things in entrepreneurship that, hey, who do we want to be? And these Russian guys that are coming in and they're trying to do this for less, they're saying, hey, yes, we know this has been a long-standing tradition, but we don't care. We want to disrupt the industry. We want to come in and we want to do things different. And sometimes that's very possible. And we're going to see, too, later in the episode, where Tony's like, let him have it. Like maybe we don't need the garbage thing. Maybe we could go in the insurance thing. And these are two concepts now, the old and the new. Do we stick with what we know and is safe and can make money, but maybe is dying off? Or do we look at something new that we could develop and grow from there? And I think it's a big thing. And once again, reputation plays a role in this. We hear Silvio, who's Tony's consigliere. So we're going to talk a little bit about who's in your crew, right? We're already starting to see Tony's sort of support system and network come together. We've got Tony. We've got Christopher, we got Dr. Melfi, we got Carmela, and we also have Silvio, who's his consigliere, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We see the support network and the team who Tony has around him coming out. But Tony, while he may be a mentor to Christopher, Tony also has that mentor that I talked about, which is Uncle Junior. And we see him and Uncle Junior as well, kind of talking about things. And obviously, Junior wants to whack pussy in his friend Artie's restaurant, which we don't think is going to work out. and there's a whole thing there. But Tony looks up to him and he respects him, so he's trying to find the best way to do that. And we see the scene sort of, where we first meet Junior happen in Artie's restaurant. So we're in Artie Bucco's restaurant, Vesuvio's, and Artie's kind of excited. Business is going well. Things are bopping. Tony's in there. Everything's moving and shaking. Everything seems to have somewhat of a stability. And the thing I love about the show is you see all these different types of entrepreneurs in the show if you're really paying attention. You have Junior, who I would say is kind of the seasoned guy, the old guy, the corporate guy that's been there forever. You have Tony that, kind of knew things but followed the old method. Christopher, who wants to go and blaze his own path, right? He's that young rebel entrepreneur, which we love. And then we have Artie, who's here in the restaurant, stabilized once again, sort of similar in that, but obviously also a clean business, not doing anything criminal or activity. Artie's a by the book guy, following things straight, really just trying to make his way, make his peace, and see what that looks like. So you have all these different type of entrepreneurs now, all these different types of models starting to come into play and start to come together. The other thing we see is Tony and Christopher obviously talking in that restaurant about what happens if Junior makes the decision to do something. Artie's path for success is now disrupted. And Tony's trying to, he grew up with Artie, so he's trying to solve that problem, which we're going to see he solves it in a very strange way. And now we go to the point where really the whole show started, right? We go to that barbecue. We go to AJ's birthday party where the mobster passes out, as said in the IMDb. I'm sorry, I just get such a kick out of that. And we cut in, and one of the things too is Tony's mom, and I want to talk a little bit about Tony's mom because we see too as well. He goes to her house. He gives her a CD player. He's trying to please her and make her happy, and she's one of his doubters, definitely one of his haters, and we're going to see this throughout. She's one of the people that doubts him. We talked about the New York family kind of looking down on the New Jersey crew, but internally, Tony's mom, while she's his mom and she loves him, she's also one of his biggest critics, right? So there's a lot of things, everything he says, she's kind of like, I don't like this, I don't like that. Daughters are better to their mothers than sons are. I mean, she's just, everything he says, there's no good that Tony can do in her eyes, but he really wants to please her. And, a lot of times too, when we take on entrepreneurial activities, sometimes to prove people wrong. And this is one of the things, this is one of my personal philosophies. I also wrote a book about entrepreneurship called like Socks on the Rooster. And in the book, I talk about, one of my cliche sayings that I don't like is prove your haters wrong. And I think we're just putting energy in then to something that's not important. And we're going to see how much Tony puts effort into proving his mom wrong. And the trouble it gets him into, right? And even proving Junior wrong in a lot of ways, and the trouble it gets him into. So I think sometimes too we can look at proving our haters or proving people wrong that aren't going to do things we like or do things in the way that we think is best. So I think that's going to be something important. And the reason why I mentioned his mom is we go to AJ's birthday party scene, like I said, where this is the catalyst, if you will, for everything that happens in later episodes. Is that we see, he comes there and one of the things, hey, Carmela comes out and says, your mom's not coming. And AJ says, which is one of the classic lines of Sopranos. I think this is the first classic line of Sopranos said by Robert Eiler, AJ Soprano. So what? No fucking ziti. Right in front of the priest. The priest gives him a little bump on the butt with a cookbook that he's looking at. But I mean, just a classic line in the show. But once again, and Tony says, are you surprised? Right? He knows that his mom's not going to come, and he knew that. But this is where we start to see all the dynamics of everything come into play and come together. And Tony's on the grill. And remember what I said about the plateaus? He seems happy, right? Like, what does he have to stress about? All right, his mom's not coming. He was a hater. He's probably a pain in his ass. She's not going to be there. He's grilling. The party looks great. Beautiful day outside. He's got a cigar in his mouth. He lights the barbecue. And what happens? The birds fly away. The one thing that was his escape from business, the one thing that was his peace, disappears. And boom, he has the panic attack. And I've seen this a lot in entrepreneurship too, where a lot of entrepreneurs can't handle success or don't know how to prepare to handle for success. Why? Because it's different than the struggle, right? You could almost argue that Tony's at a point, besides being in the mob, and we know too that later in the show he says, there's two ways for this to end for a guy like me. They're in the can or dead. So it's not like he's in a low stress job. But then again, he seems to be at a point in business where everything's successful. He's well respected by most of the people in his crew. Money seems to be flowing. He has the house he wants. Of course, at home, he's got a mistress that he seems to enjoy. At home, maybe things aren't exactly the way he wants it, but they seem to be going pretty well. So I think the idea of all this is like, okay, what is Tony going to do, and why is he stressed, right? And that's going to be a catalyst for a lot of shows. Sometimes success makes us more stressed that we sort of live in this failure, and we do see too some gambling stuff that Tony deals with later on in the episode as well. But we sort of go from there. So Tony and Carmela too. Tony goes for an MRI. And he thinks he's going to die. Hey, I had a good run. Things went well. He's like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is as good as it gets. And Carmela kind of is both sympathetic and unsympathetic. Great Italian wife scene here, where she's yelling at him. She's frustrated with him. But on the same hand, when he goes in, I love it. He goes in the MRI machine and she gives him a little wave, like, "Okay, honey, love you." So it's just a great classic scene. A lot of parallels there between Carmela and his mother that we sort of see take place. And then we cut to Christopher. And Christopher, to me, I love the character of Christopher in the show for a lot of reasons. He's that young, young, dumb, energetic, kind of entrepreneur that's excited, that's going to see how, make things happen. He wants to do certain things. He's really trying to blaze his own path, but he wants to be a part of something at the same time. So while he wants to do things his own way, he wants to be a part of this organization of the mafia. But he also wants to do it, based on his own tail. So he's maybe not following some of the rules Junior may have followed, or even Tony may have followed. He's like, look, I'm going to blaze my own path. So he heard earlier that this garbage contracting, that, hey, listen, there's a little bit of an issue here. Maybe I can solve this problem. Maybe I can step in and fix what's wrong here. And he invites Email Kohler to Satriali's, which you know is the meat store, for a meeting. And he says, hey, look, we're the young guys. We're the future of both these businesses. We got to find ways to collaborate. We got to find ways to do things, which I love this. Because once again, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, Chris is not wrong. I think if these two guys could have found a way to work together, they would have been able to do things. They would have been able to move forward. Chris has his, and this is where Chris struggles, I think. And this is where a lot of entrepreneurs struggle. I want to be the visionary in the future thing. I want to please the core of what the industry is, or the senior person maybe that I'm trying to get funding from, or money, or whatever it may be. So I'm also going to do this dumb thing that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's that balance where I think if Chris and Email would have found a way to work together, things would have been better. But we know that doesn't happen, right? So what does Chris do? They talk. He's like, oh, I got some stuff. Oh, my friend from this high school, blah, blah, blah. They're going to do some cocaine together. He lays a line of cocaine out for him to do. And while he's doing a line of cocaine, Chris kills him, right? And Chris thinks, hey, if I kill this guy, this is going to be helpful to Tony and everyone else in getting the garbage contract that they want. So he's trying to be ambitious and do the right thing. But did he talk to anybody about it beforehand? No. He, like I said, he just kind of did this recklessly, which is dangerous, right? There's a certain level of danger in recklessness that Chris needs to be careful of. That Chris needs to be careful in what he's doing, and that Chris needs to be careful of when he's going in that direction. So Chris kills him, and then who does he call for help? He calls Big Pussy, not the one that Junior, Pussy Malanga, is the one that Junior wants to wreck. This is Big Pussy Bombancero, who once again will play a key role in the show here. Pussy's one of the greatest characters to be in the show, and we know too, season one, he just made season one, which amazing character. And Pussy is once again kind of, if you look at Tony had basically a right and a left hand that kind of guided him in what he did. And I would say one of those was Silvio, and the other one was Pussy. And Chris was kind of his mentee, or the kid he was trying to bring up to kind of be the next guy. And Silvio and Pussy always kind of guided Tony. So when Chris did this, he kind of went to Pussy for help. And I think it's important too to realize the importance of mentorship and leaders, because Pussy, while he has his issues, and we're going to see that as we move along, Pussy's kind of an older version of Chris, though, where he may have been the guy that always wanted to establish himself, was always chasing things, and maybe not made to be a leader. And I think that's a big question we have to ask ourselves sometimes as entrepreneurs and business leaders. Are we made to be a leader? Are we made to be a Tony? Are we made to be a Silvio? Are we made to be a Pussy? Are we made to be a Christopher? Who are we made to be in our business? And who are we made to be in what we do in our business is going to be a big question, because there can only be one leader. And we're going to see that with Tony. Even Tony and Junior at one point try to share leadership. And there's Junior, we're going to see, is more like Chris, I think, and Big Pussy or Sal Barbancero, in that they're not really made to be leaders. They may be in a leadership position, but they're not really great leaders, and they're not doing a good job being leaders. So we're going to see that play out through here on what it takes to be a leader, and do certain people have that? One of the things that we'll see with Tony, yes, he has a temper, yes, he flies out the handle, but he's also got a calm hand in certain situations. So it's really an interesting thing that I think we see. I think Christopher turning to Big Pussy in that, hey, I know he'll help me out, and I know he's kind of like an older version of me. That's probably why he didn't go to Tony, because Tony probably would have lost it. And even Pussy says that to him, hey, listen, like, he's probably going to flip out. And actually, what Chris did ends up working out for them in the long run, because they do end up getting the garbage contract, but we don't know what's going to happen. So after that, we cut to a scene again where Tony's with his mom. And remember what I said about his mom kind of being his hater? But for some reason, he's trying to please his haters. He's trying to please his mom the best he can. And he wants to put her in this really good nursing home, which going back to that, being Italian, you always want to do what you can for your mom. I think he wants to be a good son. And that's a banner of what he does. Unfortunately, he has a mother that doesn't appreciate that. That's not always true. But in this case, he has a mom that doesn't appreciate what he's doing. And he's showing around this gorgeous, nursing home that he wants to put her in. It's beautiful, but she sees a nursing unit. She doesn't want to be there. That she doesn't care how nice the place is. They get served steak and caviar every night, and she just doesn't want to be there. And then she ends up, getting angry because she sees a nursing unit. And Tony's trying to tell her, like, Ma, it's a great place. You're going to love it. It's going to make you happy. And what happens? He has another panic attack and passes out. And then, boom, back to therapy he goes. And if you remember, too, and I don't think I mentioned this, but earlier in the first session with Dr. Melfi, they start to get to a point where in therapy they're having a little bit of a breakthrough, and he's like, and he just stands up and walks out. There's no real clear end of the session. There's no I'll be back again. He just leaves his first therapy session without really setting another appointment or anything like that from what we can see. But then when he passes out again at this nursing home incident, he then once again goes back to therapy because he's like, look, I need help. And I think an important thing as a leader to realize is, and we're going to talk about the different type of leaders that we see here. Tony is a leader that realizes he needs help. He has Sil, who's his consigliere, and now he has Dr. Melfi, who is his therapist, or basically his coach, right? We all need that leadership and we all need that coaching. And I think that's really important. The next thing we see is that Hesh and Chris are at the Bada Bing, and they're talking about, kind of things that are going on, the negotiation with the garbage contract, and also that the guy does not have the money that owes him the money from the insurance agency. So Junior is kind of mad that Tony's in charge once against Silvio, who's against Singularity. So we see the power struggle. We see this stuff coming into play again. And then also Silvio, like I said, being Tony's consigliere, says, hey, man, I'm sorry I'm the one that had to bring you the bad news. And such a pivotal line here if we're looking at this from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Sorry I have to bring you the bad news. It's important to surround ourselves, especially in business as well, with people who aren't going to tell us what we want to hear all the time. Christopher does the same thing, if you notice it in certain ways, where Chris tells Tony what he doesn't want to hear, but it's, like I said, it's all over the place. It scatters the buckshot, whereas Silvio knows how to deliver bad news properly. It's important to surround ourselves with people who aren't always going to agree with us and give us the right direction, but it's also important to surround ourselves with people who are going to give it to us in a constructive way that is helpful, right? And then we also want people who aren't going to say yes all the time, but are also going to be loyal. I mean, these are all hard things to find in businesses. These are balances, which is why Tony has multiple different people in his crew, and you're going to see how he fills them with all these different areas. The other thing we see too is that now is to talk about, like, hey, like, let's forget about the whole garbage thing. Maybe we just do this new insurance scam where this guy owes us money from sports betting, which is how a lot of people in the mafia make their money, is sports betting. That was a big part of how the mob generated income. And he says, well, if he can't pay us, we're going to set up phony clinics, and the insurance company is then going to pay out fake claims for us. And Tony's basing all this on his panic attack. He's like, he even says it. You know how much that MRI cost that I went to got? Well, if we could set up a fake clinic and they could pay us, we can make tons of money. So Tony's using some of the tragedy that he had and trying to turn it into a business opportunity, which sometimes that's where business opportunities come out of. And Chris, the younger guy's like, wait a second, no, garbage is our thing. Why is Chris saying that? Here comes the young kid saying, no, let's not change things. This is the way we've always done it, and we should always do it that way, which we know is the death of business. But on the same hand, Chris is also, like I said, that wild buckshot kid kind of going all over the place, not knowing where he's going. And the thing I love about it too, and here's the brilliance of the show. I mean, we even see it in the first episode, which is, some of the things I love about the show is it's so poignant in the way it cuts then to Artie and his wife arguing about the business. So here we have people talking about the mob and scamming insurance companies and illegal activity. And Tony's whole goal to get Ari out of the kitchen was, in a previous scene, he gave him cruise tickets so that he could go away. And Tony thought, if I did this, if I give Artie these tickets, that will solve the problem that we're having. That will give the solution to the problem. And him and his wife are arguing, and his wife's like, look, no way. We're legit people. We're straight up. It's bad enough these mobsters coming to our restaurant. You see his kids are sleeping on the table. They're the ones there at the end of the shift cleaning up the restaurant. They're the real business owners in some way. And it goes back to the idea of success. Here's Artie and his wife sweating blood, sweat, and tears over a stove at an Italian restaurant trying to grow a successful business. And here's Tony doing everything wrong and shady. And he's the one with the big house and the nice car. And Artie is even somewhat, I think you could see through various different points throughout the show, envious of that. Envious of Tony and Christopher. I think Artie always wanted to be in that life, in my opinion, from watching the show for a long time, but never really dove into that life. So I think it's something that is interesting and fascinating as we've gone throughout the show and as we've seen different things happen. Really an interesting concept. But the different views of what is hard work, right? And what type of reward do you want? Because I think there's an argument to be made that Artie and his wife are doing it the right way and they're starting to see success. Tony's doing it the wrong way and he's successful. And look at the stressors he has. So while Artie and his wife may be arguing a little bit and they run into their problems through the show, there's a point where they end up getting divorced and Artie even tries some different things. I think Artie didn't realize he had true success, where Tony never really had true success, maybe because he did it the wrong way. Food for thought, just a discussion. That's what the podcast is all about. So moving on, we're at the dinner with Carmela and Tony. They're at a restaurant having dinner. Adriana is actually the hostess, who we'll later on find out is Christopher's girlfriend. And one of the things we see here at the restaurant, this is a restaurant Tony came in earlier in the episode as well with his girlfriend that I talked about, how he had the mistress, and he comes with his wife, and the maitre d' there is like, "Hey, Tony, good to see you. It's been months since I saw you," so he's covering for him. So we see some of the issues with Tony already coming up and some of the stressors in his life. But he sits there, and him and Carmela are having a nice date night. They're having dinner. And he says, "Hey, I got to confess something." And Carmela, you saw this even in the first scene in the show where he comes in from being with the Ducks. She's frustrated with him. She loves him, but she's frustrated with him. And one of the things that she says is, "Okay, I'm getting my wine ready to throw in your face." And he's like, always with the drama, which his mom's got the drama. You can see Tony, all these things, all these stressors in his life kind of keep coming at him. And he says, "Listen, I've been going to therapy." And once she found out that he was investing time and money in growing, she was super excited. "Oh, great. I love it. That's amazing. You're going to therapy." She's excited that he's taking the time to start working on himself. And we know, too, this is one of the biggest entrepreneurial lessons here, I think, in the episode. It starts with you, right? Like, if you're working on yourself, you will get better. And we'll see how Tony working on himself, he does get better. And then we cut to the scene, too, where he's, in one of the last therapy sessions of the episode, and he's with Dr. Melfi, and he says, "Look, and I think it's the Prozac. I've been feeling better." Like I said, when he went to the restaurant with his girlfriend, he actually saw Dr. Melfi, and he said, "The decorating tips you gave me are great," because he thought the Prozac was working. He's kind of in a good place now. He hasn't had a panic attack for a while. He feels better. He was reluctant to take the drugs, but he felt better. Now, when he goes to the therapy session and he's with Dr. Melfi, the previous two we saw him in, he was reluctant, he was hesitant, but now he's feeling better and he's happy. And he's happy. Why? Because he was doing the work, but he thinks it's the drug, right? And I think a lot of times, too, in business, we mistake the success we're having as maybe like, hey, the product's selling well, or this is happening, or whatever it is. It's not usually because of the byproduct. It's because of the work. Tony was feeling better because he put in the work. Our businesses do better because we put in the work. If we put in the work, we will be successful. It's not the drug that cured him. And even Dr. Melfi says that. The Prozac takes weeks to kick in and do the work that it needs to do. It's you. It's you getting over your own shit. It's you doing the things you need to do. It's you being focused on the things. It's you choosing to be happy. You being open with Carmela. The things that he was doing now, Tony was putting himself in a place where he was successful and had all the right things, but he was doing things that were making him stressful. Once he started to alleviate some of that stress, and we're going to see, though, Tony will struggle with that. He'll go to this alleviate, and then, no, I'm going to screw up again and create the chaos in his life again. But really, it was getting over the fear. And once again, we cut to the final scene of the show, and we're back at the barbecue. We're at AJ's party, take two, right? So they're trying to redo AJ's birthday party. And, Artie's upset because his restaurant got blown up, because that's the way they were going to make sure that Junior didn't kill Pussy Malenga there. This ends up being a big tension point between Tony and Junior. They're very upset. And Artie's just like, "Man, I don't get it. I was at this point of success." And like I said, Tony's trying to help Artie, but he actually makes things worse. And one of the things Tony says, though, because now Tony's at kind of this like happy place, is he says, "Oh, I think talking helps. I think talking helps." And it really does. And I think the one thing we do in business too, a lot of times, and I hope if you're listening to this podcast, if you're a solopreneur, it's important to get out from your own. It's important to network more. It's important to get in the community, important to be around people, important to build a team, whether it's a consigliere, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a left and right hand that you may need to start building out in your business. It's important to have people around you to help make your business successful, to help allow you to see things, to help allow you to grow. Because if you don't have that, that's the difficult part. If you don't have that, that's the hard part. And I think that's really important in having the right people around you so that you grow. And we see, too, at AJ's birthday party, it's not just family, it's his whole business crew that's there as well, his whole mafia crew. But really, it's his business partners, where his business is like family. And I think that's one of the big things. I work with a lot of different businesses as a consultant. If your business is like family, if the people in your business feel like family to you, it's going to be a great thing. And I think it's important to get into business with people who have a good family, because you could tell that they're going to treat their employees the same way. They're going to interact with the people in their company the same way. It's important to look at those relationships and how people feel and how they interact and how they engage. It's really an important thing. But you see the whole family's here, his business family and his actual family, all celebrating AJ's birthday. But Chris is there as well. And like I said, why Chris is sort of Tony's protege, and Christopher definitely looks up to Tony as a mentor. There's this tension of like Chris saying, "Hey, do I want to be a part of this thing, or do I want to go out and do my own thing? I want to become an actor. I want to tell my mob story. I've got a family member that can help me out that can make that happen. I could do this. I could do that." And Chris is just kind of whining, if you will. Chris is very whiny here in this scene, and we're going to see him do that a lot throughout the show. But he's very whiny. He's like, "Well, I could do this and I could do that, but I'm loyal to you. What do I get out of it? Where's my piece of the pie? Blah, blah, blah." I think Chris doesn't realize what a great position he's in. And I think sometimes in business, too, we don't realize what a great position it is. And Tony's kind of like pissed off. He's like, "Look, man, all I've done for you, everything I've done, if you want that, go get that. But if not, I expect you to be here and be loyal to me and be with me." And Chris really has an important decision to make up. Does he want that? And the thing about Chris is, and the thing we're going to see is Chris's development throughout the show, who I would venture to say is one of the key entrepreneurs in the Sopranos universe, if you will, as we start to go through this, is his development and his opportunity to do these things, but also the stress of like what he really wants and what he can have, and he just never finds the right way to balance that, and he's not really made to be a leader. And I think sometimes we keep trying to put ourselves in leadership position where maybe as a follower we'll see Silvio's kind of a follower, but he's always happy with where he's at. Paulie Walnuts is a follower, but he's always kind of happy with where he's at to a certain extent. And we're going to see that. Some people are made to be leaders. Some people are made to be leaders in a smaller set. And that's okay. I don't want to say they're made to be followers, but leaders in different ways. There's a lot of self-evaluation I think we need to do as entrepreneurs and say, "Hey, where do we fit, or where do I need to be?" Barstool Sports, one of the favorite companies I think that come out of the last 5-10 years. Dave Portnoy is not the CEO of the company. He's the leader of the company, but he's not the CEO. He's got someone running the day-to-day business. He's doing the stuff now he loves and enjoys in the business, which we see Tony try to do as well. He tries to get away from the things he doesn't like doing in the business, and he has other people around him that are doing certain things. And then, of course, we end the episode with everybody coming in the house to eat, which, like I said, if you treat your family's business, breaking bread together is a great thing. And then we're going to see now what happens in episode 2. So a lot set up here in episode 1, a lot set up in understanding the character, obviously character development, the businesses involved, the roles of all the different people. So I'm really excited to start to explore and dig into this. And like I said, this show will be based on the entrepreneurial perspective of it. And like I've already mentioned about some of the things we see in here, some of the things I'll be like, wait a second, how does that relate to business? I may be completely off, but it's my perception of it, which I hope you can take a little bit of a lesson or a little bit of nugget from it. If not, that's okay too. But if you do, let me know. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree, disagree. If you think I'm on point. If you think I'm off point. I mean, let's make this a conversation too, because I think that's what's going to make future episodes great. Is if we can have a conversation about this. And what episodes did you learn the most entrepreneurial lessons from? I'd love to hear from you as well. If you ever looked at it from that perspective, or if not, maybe go back, rewatch episode 1, and let me know what entrepreneurial lessons you pulled out of it. I'd love to hear that in the comments wherever you're listening to this. We are going to start some social media accounts as well. I will announce those on the next episode because I know I did a lot of introductory stuff on this episode. Sopranopreneur.com will be the best way to get to the episodes. So you'll be able to follow that. And like I said, I'm going to give you my show notes that you're able to look over those. Once again, apologize for any typos that you may see in there. But those are the notes that I took while I was watching the show. Some of the key points that I got out of it. Those will be available to you every episode if you'd like to check those out. You can connect with me as well on all social media. MikeFicara.com is my website, and there's links there to my Instagram, LinkedIn, any social media platform you prefer. You can connect with me there. So I'm excited. So for more great episodes like this, visit Sopranopreneur.com. For more about me, MikeFicara.com, and I will see you on the next episode.